Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei Was Betrayed and Got All of Trihexa Powers movie. Before we start, please go support MeliodasElReyDemonio for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken characters' gender, but of course Issei is a male. In this story, Issei is betrayed by everyone he loves, and he will start a life of his own without depending on anyone. Come and join to see the great adventure of Issei in his new life. Chapter: The Betrayal. Everything would start after a while after Issei defeated the great Trihexa beast. Issei would remain as a hero and one of the most powerful beings on the planet above all species, and the most respected and desired being by women. After that great battle, Issei would have changed a little his way of seeing the world because of the last words that the great Trihexa Vestia said to him before defeating him and absorbing him. Note: in this story Issei absorbed Trihexa but kept it hidden from all those who believed that Issei had locked him again in the other dimension. This will be explained later. End of the note. Issei, although he had changed a lot since that incredible battle, never showed it and acted as always. But deep down he always knew that with the fall of Trihexa, the war would not have ended, but he had not told anyone because he did not want to worry them. But in an unknown place there were 5 beings with a dark appearance. They were in a meeting speaking in a strange language incomprehensible to living beings. At any moment, the one who seemed to be the leader and the one in front would raise his hand a little, and blue fire would appear. In another very far away place Issei was with his girls sleeping in a big bed in the human world, more specifically in Issei's house. From one moment to another, Issei, very excited, would open his eyes knowing what was about to happen, and the moment he wanted to stand up, some chains would appear from the walls and would catch Issei by the hands and feet and would hold him with great force. Issei would try to summon Drag, but his skin would burn with a blue fire much more powerful than the fire of hell. Scream, what the hell is going on, Drag? Issei would ask mentally while trying in vain to free himself from the chains. I don't know, mate, I've never felt this magic in any being in the world, and apparently you can't use even a drop of magic or your skin will be burned, so it would be better if you didn't do anything and wait for someone to help you, Drag would answer, surprised but nervous. The girls. Issei would say, remembering Rias and the others, but he would see in front of him, a few meters away, a totally dark being. What the hell is that? Issei would say to himself, incredibly scared since he felt a fear that he had never felt in his life just by looking at that monster. Issei would observe how the girls began to stand up as if nothing had happened, and with psychopathic faces, they looked at Issei with great hatred. Since Issei couldn't use magic, he couldn't know that the girls were being controlled by the monster, and he thought that he was really being betrayed. That thought was reinforced by the last words that Trihexa had said to him. This will be my end, but yours will be much worse, being provoked by the people you love the most. Words of Trihexa that made Issei's world change. What the hell? What Trihexa said was true. You damn things are betraying me, Issei would say, whispering with his head down. Issei would see the being in front of him again, but it was no longer there. From one moment to the next Issei would see how the girls would begin to invoke their magic and would begin to torture Issei. This great torture would last for 20 hours, and at night Issei would not bear the pain any longer and would decide something very risky. Very well, Drag, since you won't talk to me, I'll have to try that. If it works, I might have a chance to escape from this, and if it doesn't work I'll be killed, but that doesn't matter, since I'll be killed anyway if I don't try, so I don't lose anything, Issei would say to himself. Okay, it's my turn, Kaneko would say, summoning her gloves to hit Issei. She would approach Issei, prepare her fist and try to hit him in the face, but everyone would hear how the chains of one of Issei's fists were destroyed and stopped Kaneko's blow. They would all feel how Issei's power was increasing at a brutal speed. He would free himself from the other chains that had him tied, but doing that required a great effort and an enormous amount of magic. Damn, what is that power? And how did you free yourself? You would say, desperate and surprised. You bastards, I will never forgive you for this betrayal, Issei would say, seeing the girls with great fury, still holding Kaneko's fist. At any moment this would hit Kaneko in the stomach, but as Issei had used a lot of power to free himself from the chains and was aware that he still needed energy to escape, the only thing he did when hitting her was send her with great speed to crash into a wall, destroying it completely. It's time to escape, he would say to himself, and disappear from everyone's sight, escaping at an incredible speed. On the other hand, the 5 dark beings who saw that would start to talk. That stupid Trihexa has betrayed us, one of them would say. That doesn't matter, Trihexa was just a puppet and we knew she was going to betray us, another one of them would say. Again we see Issei escaping at a great speed that was not visible to human eyes or beings at the level of high-ranking demons. Those damn things will pay me. Thank goodness I was able to use Trihexa's power to escape, or I would have died. For now I don't know what's happening to Drag, but I can't use his power, so I'll have to keep using this power until I'm a long way from where the others are, although I'm not at all used to this power, but I'll accept the consequences, Issei would say to himself. The brown-haired boy would arrive at a mountain and see a small cave and would go in, deactivating his power so that they could not locate him. Thus he would faint as soon as it was deactivated, since that power was thousands of times more powerful than adrenaline, since he could not control it. After the origin of everything. Flashback. Issei, very exhausted and with a lot of blood in his body, found himself in front of a Trihexa, completely without energy and with nothing else to do. I was finally able to finish this war is finally over, Issei would say, breathing heavily. Of course not much, this is just beginning, Trihexa would respond exhausted. What do you mean? Issei would ask, very confused. You will soon know, this will be my end, but yours will be much worse, being provoked by the people you love the most, Trihexa would respond, who would begin to turn into dust and would get into Issei's body. Wait, what? What is this? Wait, Issei would shout, very scared, who would feel how his power overloaded and fell unconscious. A few hours later Issei would open his eyes and the first thing he would see was where Trihexa was, but Drake would speak. Finally you're awake, buddy, Drake would say with his characteristic imposing voice. What happened, Drake? Why was he passed out and where did Trihexa go? Issei asked, a little nervous. Calm down, buddy, Trihexa didn't go anywhere, the great beast of the apocalypse joined your body and gave you its powers, you'll have to train them if you ever want to control it, for now it would be better if you don't tell anyone about this, since they could start to fear you and betray you, Drake would say to Issei, who would remember everything, but what makes him most curious are the last words Trihexa said. It's okay, Drake, for now I'll just say that I was able to lock him up again, so Issei would return to everyone. Some days Issei would disappear from everyone to train the power that Trihexa gave him, but the only thing he would achieve was being able to activate it for a short time, but not being able to use it effectively since he didn't know how, he didn't have a teacher either, and if he told someone about this, it could spread everywhere. End of flashback. After 24 hours Issei would wake up and see how his entire body was completely healthy. This must have been due to Trihexa's regenerative power. Note. Trihexa had regenerative power but it worked very slowly, the most serious wounds could take more than 15 hours in the worst cases. Hey Drake, Issei would speak. What's up, buddy? Drake would ask, still surprised by what happened the night before. What happened to you? Why didn't you help me with your power when I needed it? Issei would ask, somewhat upset. I'm sorry, mate, but seeing that dark being and his power made me remember something. What, Drake? Issei would ask more calmly. Do you really want to know, buddy? It's very possible that in the future you'll have to face these monsters, Drake would answer. These? Are there more of those monsters? Issei would ask, exhausted. Yes, Issei, the one you saw last night is just one of them, this is the first time I've seen one in person, but in reality there are 5 of them. I'll tell you something that no being in the world other than Albion and I know, and that we promised never to talk about this again. A long time ago in this world there was a god who was the god with the highest rank, but what few knew is that above and many steps above God, there were 5 beings thousands of times more powerful than God himself. These beings were neutral, all they did was observe everything, and they were the creators of everything, God himself was created by one of them. Really? The very god? Issei would ask, shocked by the story his partner was telling him. Of course, Issei, God was strong but not so strong as to be created out of nothing like these 5 beings were. When the Great War broke out, these 5 beings were watching everything, and apparently we made them angry, since their creations were killing each other, so the first feeling they had since they exist was the revenge of killing all their creations for what they were doing, so that evil invaded them completely. These 5 beings would appear in the human world to destroy everything and recreate it, but God, along with 3 other dragon gods who were at the level of the Trihexa at the time of fighting Issei a few months ago, and many dragons of my same level, had to face these gods to protect what they previously wanted to destroy. Many of my companions and brothers died by those beings. These dark beings were completely dominating the battle, but God came up with an idea with which they could defeat these beings, so God communicated with those who were now his allies and told us his plan. We all accepted. This plan was to abandon our lives, but in exchange, we could lock these 5 dark beings in a dimension never before known, so everything was as God planned, but before finishing the spell many things happened. One was that God spoke to me. He told me everything about these beings and that he was his first creation. The last thing he said to me was goodbye, take care and protect this world in the future from these beings, and out of nowhere I only saw darkness, but before that all of us who were fighting had felt like a little of the magic of these beings entered the body of Trihexa, who was just a little baby, but we couldn't do anything because we could ruin the whole plan. When I woke up I found myself with Albion in the middle of a gigantic desert, so I assumed they had succeeded. They had been able to lock up these beings, but the bodies of my companions, brothers and that of God were nowhere to be found. That was how the true death of God and dragons, that had the same power as adult Trihexa. After that we promised that neither of us would ever talk about that topic again, that no one remembered. And what happened with Trihexa? Issei would ask. Some of the most powerful beings that still existed had gathered, and seeing that Trihexa could be a danger in the future for having the same blood as those dragons, they decided to lock him in a dimension created by themselves. Now that I think about it, that was the best thing they could have done, since if they hadn't done it, we would all be dead, since that small power of the beings that entered Triexa's body was surely to torment him and make him follow their orders or he would die. But now that you have Triexa's power, I feel that magic has disappeared, Drake would answer. That's impressive. I had never imagined that there were more dragons at the same level as Trihexa and that they had sacrificed themselves for everything that now exists, but what doesn't fit me is, how could those beings escape from the dimension? Issei would ask. I don't know, I can't imagine how they were able to escape. What I do know is that they are a great danger, and I don't know why they haven't destroyed everything yet, since if they want to, they can come right now and destroy everything without anyone even putting up a fight, Drake would say, very surprised. Hey Drake, do you think it's because of me? Are they waiting for me to get stronger so they can fight them? Issei would ask very seriously. That's a good question, probably that's the case, but I don't understand it. They were dark beings. Why wait for someone to fight them? Drake would ask himself. Well partner, you better start training if you want to protect this world, Drake would say. Sure, buddy, but how will I do it? If before when I trained it didn't benefit me at all, and the only thing I achieved was being able to activate the power of Trihexa for less than a minute. I have an idea, mate, Drake would say. On the other hand, at Issei's house, Rias and the others were waking up after fainting when Issei escaped. What happened here? Why is everything destroyed? Rias asked, touching her head in great pain. What? Why does my head hurt so much? Akeno would ask. Where is Issei-senpai? Asia would ask, equally with a headache like the others. Why is there blood on the floor? Zenobia would ask in terror. On. Where are you Issei? Roswis would ask very scared. And where is Kaneko too? Rias would ask, very worried. President. They would hear and they would all turn towards a wall that was destroyed where Kaneko would come out with some blood and they would all go to help her. What happened, Kaneko? Why are you here? Akeno asked, very nervous. I don't know, the only thing I remember is that we all slept with Issei-senpai, Kaneko would say with effort. On the other hand, Issei was running at an incredible speed through a forest without using any magic, just his half-human, half-dragon body, but even so, he had an incredible speed, he would run until he reached the city. And now, partner? Issei would ask very seriously. Chapter the training. Issei had arrived at the city where he lived after 24 hours of having disappeared. And now what, partner? Issei would ask seriously. Very well, I will guide you, Drake would say, seeing Issei's seriousness. Thus the brown-haired man would arrive at an abandoned building where he would enter and feel the presence of a renegade demon. First kill that demon, and I'll tell you where you'll train, Drake would tell him, and Issei would just summon the bastard and start walking without any fear. He would come face to face with the renegade demon who was about 8 meters tall. But wow, what do we have here? Luck is on my side. I think it's time to eat a little. The renegade demon would say with pride while smiling. Issei from his booster gear would create a kind of red sword. Something like that coming out of the booster gear but in red. But what? You're the hero they talk so much about. Issei the demon would say, very scared and trembling in an incredible way. It's time to die would be the simple words of a totally serious Issei. Wait, he didn't kill me. He couldn't finish speaking since Issei would appear behind the demon and the renegade's body would be cut into 7 pieces. Wow buddy, how were you able to summon a sword? Drake would ask very surprised. I don't know Drake, I just imagined a sword and that's what came out, Issei would say equally somewhat confused. Maybe it's one of the many Trihexa abilities that you obtained and that you fused with my power, Drake would answer, clarifying Issei's doubt. Okay Drake, we're here, what now? Issei would ask. Well, it seems this demon was trying to do what you are about to do now, I just hope it works, all you have to do is go through that wall over there and you will appear in your training place, Drake would say. How? Is it that easy? Then why couldn't that demon do it? Issei would ask. Just do it and your questions will be answered, Drake would answer. Issei would start walking and as if it were intangibility, Issei would go through the wall and appear in a place full of light. Where are we? The brown-haired man would ask. In heaven, that demon could not enter because he was not pure of heart and luckily you still are despite what happened to you, that portal there is one of the many that there are throughout the world, Drake would say, surprising Issei. Suddenly Michael would appear above him like the great archangel, shining a light so bright that it made Issei have to cover his eyes. What is offered to the hero Issei in heaven? Michael would ask. Remember Issei, since you saved everyone, you're welcome anywhere you want, Drake would say mentally. Now let me talk, okay? Michael, we've come here so you can give my partner a training place. You don't need explanations since your doubts right now will soon be resolved. Just give him a place where he can train and get stronger as quickly as possible. Drake would say with his imposing voice. It's okay, I would do anything for Issei-san, Michael would say, as kind as ever, follow me, I will guide you to the place where father trained me, Michael would say, starting to fly, being followed by Issei, until reaching a place where there was a large door. Before entering, I will have to explain some rules to you. In this place time passes differently, while here and in the human world 24 hours pass, in this room a year will pass, also in this place it is totally empty, but there is a machine that father created, and it can create whatever you want except life. Another thing is that you cannot spend more than 48 hours, or you will be locked forever in that place, Michael would warn. Recopied from Dragon Ball V. That's incredible, this place will be the best to train, Issei would say, surprised, but still keeping his face serious. Thank you very much, Michael, now. I'll go in, see you in 48 hours or less, Issei would say, saying goodbye while walking. I told you, buddy, this place is the right one, Drake would say. But how did you know about this place if you have never entered heaven? Issei would say, confused. It is one of the many secrets that God told me before his farewell. It is incredible how a being as wise as him existed and left everything prepared for when these dark beings returned, Drake would say, admiring the almighty God. So these two would enter the large room, seeing a totally white space. While all this was happening, Rias was communicating with her brother through magic, very worried about what had happened to Issei. What's wrong, little sister? Xerxes would ask with her typical smile. Rias told him everything that happened since they woke up. That made Xerxes very worried. Very well, Rias, for now return to the underworld. I, along with a few more demons, will go investigate what happened to Issei, Xerxes would respond, and so Rias and the others would return to the Gremory castle. On the other hand, the dark beings still observe everything that was happening. Very well, everything is going according to plan, one of them would say. Why don't we just go and destroy everything? Another would say. Because it's more fun that way, even if there's no one to give us even a little bit of a fight. I have hope that that kid will become strong, another one would respond. No, I don't have to wait any longer for this, I myself will go and destroy everything before that brat becomes a problem, the one who wanted to destroy everything would say. Enough, silence, here we will continue what we already had planned, and whoever says otherwise we will only destroy him, another, who seemed to be the leader, would say with an imposing voice. Meanwhile, the only one who hadn't spoken would look at this scene with some amusement and continue without speaking. Meanwhile in heaven. The moment Issei entered Michael, he would have many questions like. This is the first time I've seen Issei with that face. What happened that Issei suddenly wants to become stronger? Is an even greater threat than Trihexa coming? How did they know how to enter heaven? What's happening here? I have to be prepared for anything that happens in the future. While in Asgard. We see how the great and all-powerful Odin was thinking about his great throne. What's bothering you, Lord Odin? One of the Asgardian soldiers would ask. Nothing, I just think, Odin would respond. Okay, Odin-sama, the soldier would answer. What is this fear that I have been feeling for a while? Something very big is about to happen, and I have to be prepared for this, but I don't think we will have the same luck of surviving as with Trihexa. This time I feel that it is something very big, Odin would say mentally while looking at his trembling hands. So 48 hours passed where Xerxes and some researchers were looking at Issei's case, but they found nothing. The news would impact the girls, who would be very worried about Issei. Michael was next to the door, still waiting for Issei's exit, after having left all the troops of heaven ready for anything, like Odin, who had called the most powerful Valkyries, his son Thor with his grandchildren, and had even defrosted Loki and his son, since they needed help from everyone without exceptions. Michael was waiting for Issei to come out, but from one moment to the next, he would feel a great power that would make even the bravest tremble, along with an incredible pressure that he could barely bear. The great archangel would look at the door and see how a kind of celestial being came out of there, who was Issei, but very different from the one he knew. This Issei looked more adult, his clothes were almost torn, he had longer hair, more noticeable muscles, and a smile that would scare anyone. Imagine him like Trunks when he came out of the time chamber when he was with Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z. Chapter 8, Big Fight. Issei had left the room with his new appearance after 2 years of training. Michael, seeing him, would be incredibly surprised, since he had never felt such an immense amount of power in a being who wasn't even using magic and was only physical power. It's incredible, Michael would say, surprised. That was very effective, thank you for lending me this room, Michael, Issei would say with a small smile. You're welcome, Michael would respond, still surprised. Okay, goodbye, Issei would say, disappearing out of nowhere, leaving Michael shocked. Meanwhile with the dark beings. It's finally out, it's time, one of them would say. I'll take care of it, another would answer, and with his help a particular red would be created that would create a species of giant monsters about 50 meters tall that would appear in the human world. Quickly all the beings of the supernatural world would be on alert, since they had not felt that incredible amount of energy for a long time. The leaders and the strongest would quickly go to a city where this monster was located and would destroy it with just a slight movement of his hand, creating a gust of wind. What is this giant monster? Azazel would ask. I've never seen it before, it doesn't belong to any race, so it's a unique specimen, probably from space, since that magic we feel is not like any other I've felt, Xerxes would say, arriving along with many high-class demons. We will have to combine all our forces to defeat this giant, Michael would say, arriving with many other angels and archangels. Hey Xerxes, where is Issei? The great Odin would ask, and the most powerful creatures in the world would begin to appear to fight this monster. We don't know, he just disappeared one day, and we're still investigating what happened to him, Xerxes would answer. As I imagined, something very serious is coming, but this monster is already very powerful, I estimate 10% of the power of Trihexa, Odin would say mentally. Okay, listen everyone, we'll have to combine all our magic to defeat this monster in one hit, or it will all end here, Xerxes would shout, where everyone would listen and agree. So everyone would start carrying it while the monster just watched them as if they were cockroaches. The great combined attack of all would be sent at an incredible speed towards the great monster directly in its face, but it would open its mouth, and a totally dark magical power would come out that would pierce like a leaf, the combined attack of all those who would receive it fully. The monster's big attack would impact and create a super explosion. After the smoke has gone, you see everyone on the ground with mortal wounds and many soldiers completely destroyed. Damn, that monster is incredibly powerful, apparently it's our end, Azazel would say with a smile as he accepted his death. But from one moment to the next they would feel a presence so imposing that it caused more terror than the monster itself. This presence came from the sky, and everyone would see how something fell, separating the clouds at an incredible speed. It would land on the ground, creating a large layer of smoke while making a large crater. Who is it? Odin would ask, surprised, while Michael smiled since he knew who it was. As the layer of smoke dispersed, an Issei would be seen that everyone would immediately recognize, but who was very changed. That's… Azazel wouldn't finish speaking since Xerxes would interrupt him. Issei. Issei would look at the great giant monster, who would turn to look at Issei head on. Wait Issei, don't face him alone, he's very strong, Xerxes would say worriedly. Upon hearing that, Issei would take a rock that was on the ground and create a large sword of about a meter. But what? That brat has new abilities, Odin would say, surprised, as would the others. We have to help him, Azazel would say, trying to stand up. Wait, let's leave this to the boy, I know he can, Odin would answer wisely. The great monster knew that Issei was not just anyone, so he would begin to increase all his power until he reached 100%, leaving everyone shocked. Issei would start running towards the monster, who out of nowhere would start to feel an incredible fear and would try to back away, but his body would be split in two by Issei's sword that pierced his stomach. Everyone seeing that would be speechless. Issei, without even using a bit of magic and only using his power as a human, was able to pierce through that immense monster with destructive power. Boo. But what would be the question that would be going through the heads of many while they watched as Issei fell back to the ground on his feet and turned his back on everyone while he watched as the monster fell into two parts. Is that Issei? But it is very strong. Also it looks bigger. What happened to him? These are some of the questions that many of the soldiers who were still alive asked themselves. Hey Issei, Azazel would say, standing but very hurt. Oh? Hello Azazel, how long? Issei would answer, seeing everyone with his typical normal face and seeing how everyone was mortally wounded, so he would decide to use some of his magic and heal everyone, leaving them as good as new and restoring all their powers. It's incredible, one of the soldiers would say. What a surprise, Issei-san, you've become incredibly powerful, Xerxes would say, approaching Issei. It seems like Xerxes-san, Issei would say kindly. How did you get that power, Issei? Azazel would ask with his typical smile. I'm sorry, but for now I can't tell you. The only thing I have to warn you is to be prepared, because an immense war never seen before is coming, and if you can, train yourselves to become strong, because with your current level you will die easily, Issei would say, leaving everyone with many doubts. Wait, what? Azazel would ask. That's all from me, now I'm going, Issei would say. Wait Issei, I have many doubts, Xerxes would say worriedly. I'm sorry Xerxes-san, but for now I can't say much, Issei would say, turning his back on him and about to leave. Wait, at least let me call Rias and the others, Xerxes would say. It won't be a problem, I'll visit them myself very soon, Issei would say, who would make a great leap without anyone seeing him and would raise a lot of dust. Hey Drake, now that I know the girls were controlled by one of those monsters, what can I do? Because even though they were controlled, it was their own hands that hurt me a lot, and that can't be fixed easily, Issei would say somewhat sadly, but keeping his face serious. Mate, what I recommend is that you go with the girls and talk and tell them that you need some time, since for now you have to concentrate on learning new things to face those monsters, Drake would say. Okay buddy, tomorrow I'll go visit them and talk, Issei would say with a small smile. Meanwhile with the dark beings. Wow, it has exceeded our expectations, one of them would say. It's much better than we expected, we'll finally have a fight worthy of our power, another would say, smiling evilly. I will be the first to face him, another would respond. As you wish, but if you die, we won't help you, another would respond. After the appearance of someone. After Issei left, having easily killed the monster, he would go to his new home, a house that he had built himself with one of his new abilities, which would be telekinesis. Upon arriving, he would see everything and greet his new pet, which would be a small dog that he had picked up from the street. "Hello little Tommy, I'm back," Issei would say, bending down and petting the puppy, who was very happy. After petting him for a while, he would go to his room and lie down to sleep for a while. "You know, buddy, I'm still surprised at how strong you've become. Just by using your own power as a human, you can easily defeat a monster with 15% of Trihexia's power. You are undoubtedly the best and most powerful wielder I've ever had," Drake would say in Issei's dream with pride. Meanwhile, Xerxes had arrived at his castle, and the first thing he would do was gather his entire family, together with a group of Rias, who were worried about their brother going to face that fearsome power that they had felt. "While one Sama, were you able to defeat the monster without taking any damage?" You would say as you arrived and saw your brother completely intact. "Don't laugh, all the beings of this world have gathered, but not even with our best powers could we defeat the monster, and we would all be dead if it weren't for Issei who saved us," Xerxes would say, dropping the bomb. Saying all that, the Lucifer family would be shocked because Issei had already disappeared. "Issei?" You would say, very surprised. "Of course, he arrived and as if he were a simple ant, he killed the fearsome monster that we couldn't without even scratching him," Xerxes would say, somewhat disappointed in himself. "But how is that possible? The same Issei we know doesn't have enough power to kill a monster of that caliber so easily, he would have to use a lot of his power," Xerxes' father would say, surprised. Note. Remember that Issei was able to defeat Trihexa, but using all his power and almost dying on the spot, end of the note. Well, believe it or not, Issei didn't use any magic and only used his power as a human, but he still had Drake since he felt his power inside Issei. Diria Xerxes impacting everyone. "Hey son, where is Issei?" Xerxes' mother would say, worried about Issei, who already wanted to see him. "I'm sorry mother, but Issei said he was going to visit us soon and then he just left," Xerxes would say, making Rias and the others feel bad. "But why didn't he want to come see us after all the days that have passed without us seeing each other?" You would say, very sad, just like the others. "Don't worry girls, at least we know that Issei is fine and that he will visit you soon," Xerxes' wife would say, whose name I don't remember. The next day. Issei would wake up and dress in a new outfit. "Okay, I'm ready to see them again," Issei would say seriously. "Okay buddy, you know that for any advice I'll be here," Drake would say literally, since he can't separate from Issei. "Thanks, buddy," Issei would say, and from his room, he would disappear and appear in front of Lucifer's castle. There were two guards who, upon seeing Issei appear out of nowhere, would be on guard since they did not know who he was. "Hey you, identify yourself," one of the guards would say. "Don't you know who I am? My name is Issei Haidu. Have you forgotten me so quickly?" he would say with a challenging smile. None of the guards would believe him since he was different from Issei and had a strange beast, so they would decide to attack him for pretending to be the missing hero. Issei, seeing their intentions, would become disappointed and teleport behind them, knocking them out with a blow to the back of the head. "What pathetic guards you've got," Xerxes Issei would say, and enter the castle and feel like the Lucifer family were in a large room, apparently having a meeting. The brown-haired man would walk up to her and kick the door open, causing everyone to stare in amazement. "Hello," Issei would say, waving with his hand and a small smile. Imagine that he is waving with his hand and not with two fingers raised. "Issei?" Xerxes would say, surprised. "Issei?" All the girls would shout with great happiness, crying, going to hug Issei, but at the moment of throwing themselves at him, the brown-haired boy would disappear and appear behind the girls, letting them fall to the ground. "Sorry," Issei would say, walking towards the large table and sitting on one of the chairs, and with a serious face he would say. "Let's talk." "Hey, Issei, why did you avoid us?" You would say, you would laugh sadly. "Yes, Issei, we wanted to hug you," Akeno would say, somewhat embarrassed. "Issei-senpai, we miss you," Asia would say very nervously. While they were saying that, Issei was sitting with his eyes closed in a position waiting for them to finish talking, and when they finished, Issei would speak again. "Please girls, take a seat," Issei would say, still with his eyes closed. The women would be worried upon hearing Issei's serious tone, but Xerxes would speak. "Take a seat and let's listen to what Issei has to say," the Redeed would say, and Rias would sit down, and the others would stand behind her watching Issei nervously. "Very well, where do I start?" The brown-haired man would say and explain everything that happened to him since the day the girls betrayed him, everything except where he trained, and that he has the power of Trihexa. He only told them that he trained in a place that they couldn't know yet. Everyone hearing what Issei said would be truly paralyzed. "No, we would never do something like that," you would say. "It's true, we love each other," Akeno would answer. "We would never do that to Issei," Zenobia would say, and then everyone would say practically the same thing, just with different words. Calm down girls, I know it wasn't you, in reality you were controlled by someone, or rather by something Issei would say with a serious face. What are they referring to, young Issei? Zerch's father would ask, somewhat surprised. They were controlled by some dark beings that will soon arrive on Earth, and I have been training to confront them. You cannot know the history of these beings since it is a secret, but I will only tell you that there are 5 of them, and that they are very strong, Issei would say seriously. Dark beings. But Issei, with your current fighting level, you are incredibly powerful without even using your magic, Zerches would say, somewhat confident. Of course I'm strong, but against them I'm not sure of my strength. With the information that Drake has told me, I'm not sure if I'm even going to be able to take on one of them, Issei would say somewhat angrily, and would leave everyone surprised and scared. But Issei-senpai, if you know that we didn't go, then will you come back with us? Kaneko would ask worriedly. No, it doesn't matter if they were controlled or not, what I suffered was too much, both physically and mentally, seeing how my own loved ones were making me suffer, although now I know it wasn't you, but the pain will not disappear easily, besides now we will only be allies, since I have to become stronger to face those monsters, Issei would answer. Upon hearing Issei's response, everyone would be disappointed, but especially the girls who would be crying out of sadness. But Issei would stand up and say a few words that would cheer the girls up a little. Don't worry, even if you've done that I'm still willing to risk my life for you, and if you need me for something I'll be there as an ally and companion, Issei would say with a small smile, and with those words the girls would realize that the Issei they knew was still alive, and one day they would have him again. Out of nowhere Issei's body would feel a chill that was noticed by everyone, and after 5 seconds, everyone would feel a fear that far surpassed that which they had for Trihexa, and would fall to the ground due to the great pressure of the environment. There here Issei would say very seriously, standing, since the pressure didn't affect him because of how strong it was. Boo. Zerches would ask, trying to stand up, but it was practically impossible since he couldn't move a hair. The dark beings, this one would say very seriously. Chapter the big fight. Are they here already? Zerches would say, his eyes wide open, still on the floor. You're right, Issei would say very seriously, and would create a field for each member of the Gremory family so they could walk freely. I advise you to stay here and not go out, Issei would say, starting to walk outside where they were. When Issei left he would see a dark being. This one was really giant and measured about 50 meters. Wow, so you're the one I'm fighting, the dark being would say. Stop talking and tell me why you came, Issei would say seriously, looking at his face. Isn't it obvious? I came to this disgusting world to test your new strength, the dark being would say. Very well, I will finish you right here, but before destroying you, I would like to know your name, Issei would say with a small challenging smile. My name is, the dark being would say. The others who heard this would wonder what he had said since they had not understood. But in your language you can call me Dark, the dark entity would say. Let this fight begin, but first I will get to your level, Dark would say, decreasing his size to be almost at the same level as Issei. Very well Dark, let it be a worthy fight, Issei would say with a small smile, just like the dark being. In less time than Zerch's eyes could see, Issei's fist was already in Dark's stomach, who would fly away at a speed that surpassed the limits of the imaginable. Wow, this will be a fight the world will never forget, said Zerch's father seriously. Dark, upon being launched, would react only after 0.0000005 seconds, but he was already about 500 kilometers away from where Issei was, but at a surprising speed he would get on Issei's back, who would quickly react, and the two would clash fists in an impressive way. The great clash of fists would create a great impact that would begin to destroy everything in its path. The great castle of the Lucifers would be practically destroyed, collapsing, but everyone would be saved since Issei had previously put an energy field on them. Issei and Dark would smile and start bumping fists in an incredible way, where all of hell would be destroyed little by little. At that moment all the beings of the world would appear where Zerches was, and the first thing they would do was create a large energy field around Issei and Dark, because if they continued like that not only hell, but the whole world would be destroyed, so everyone would unite, from the weakest to the strongest, to create that great field, where they would have to strive to maintain it. From one moment to another, Dark would increase his power and give Issei an incredible blow to the stomach that would make him spit, but the brown-haired man would quickly return it with more force to the bottom of the mouth, making Dark float about 20 meters, where Issei would quickly jump and, joining his two fists, would give Dark a great blow to the stomach that would make him brutally crash against the ground, creating a cloud of dust. That's not normal at all, the two of them are fighting without even using any magic, Michael would say with great effort. Seconds later Dark would emerge from the dust cloud and smiling evilly would say. That was a good warm-up, now let's increase our powers more, Dark would say. That's fine by me, Issei would say, smiling somewhat nervously, and would summon the booster Geared, which to everyone's surprise was a new and improved booster Geared that now covered his entire arm up to the elbow. That's incredible, Azazel would say, shocked. It's impressive, just by invoking his magic he has far surpassed Trix's power at its maximum, Auden would say, surprised, as would everyone else. Meanwhile, Dark would smile and begin to emanate a dark magic so evil that it would make the weakest faint from fear, while the strongest would be about to faint, but would not give up, since they knew that the planet was in danger, but they could no longer bear the great field. Dark continued to increase his great dark power, making Issei smile nervously, not knowing if he could defeat him or not. After a while, Dark would stop increasing his power, and everything would return to normal. "Aren't you going to increase your power more?" Issei would ask. "This will be enough," Dark would say seriously. "I think you're underestimating me," Issei would say, putting himself on guard to attack. "Make me think otherwise and I won't underestimate you anymore," Dark would say. From one moment to the next he would find himself in front of Issei with a speed that not even the security himself could see. At that moment Dark would give him an incredible knee to the face, but before he flies away, Dark would take Issei's arm and turn it around, slamming it against the ground, creating a huge crater. Issei would try to get up, but the dark being would grab him by the head and start dragging him across the floor, brutally destroying everything. Then he would send him flying into the sky and say these words. "Agitator died," Dark would say, creating a ball of energy as dark as the universe's basaltic energy and throwing it at Issei, but this small ball the size of a football would become giant from one moment to the next. Issei would react and with great effort would begin to stop the immense dark ball, but he couldn't, and little by little, it would begin to consume him. Everyone who saw that would worry about Issei and think that his end was near, just like all of them. But incredibly the ball would explode and it would be seen as something fell to the ground. Everyone would be surprised since a shiny armor with wings would fall to the ground standing up. "Ignore the sword. Now we start with a real fight," Issei would say seriously and with some fury in his being. "This is the first time you use all your power, partner, be careful," Drake would say mentally. "As you wish," Dark would say, reaching his maximum power, surprising everyone since the Trihexa looked like a small winged kitten of these two dragons. Issei would quickly start using some of his tricks. Issei would quickly create destructive magic from Drake's power and throw it at Dark, who with some effort would block it, but that was only a distraction, and behind him, another Issei would appear with the same armor trying to hit Dark, but when he realized it, he would quickly create a sword and cut that Issei clone in two, but he would receive a big blow to the face since Issei had used another ability to create small portals to pass through his fist and hit him. Dark would begin to block all the blows, but Issei would combine his ability with another technique and would begin to create many portals around him, and from his back, several arms would appear with magic whips that would cross the portals and would appear around Dark, taking him by the arms and legs. Issei quickly got in front of Dark, giving him a super powerful blow to the face that didn't send him flying since he was held by the whips. "That's fine," Dark would say, where a dark aura would emanate around him that would cancel all the magic that Issei had used, freeing himself and hitting Issei in the stomach where he would be thrown a few meters, but Issei would continue using more tricks, and this time he would summon two giant arms with disgusting purple skin that would try to grab Dark, but he would create two dark balls and destroy the arms, but Issei would appear in front of him again and hit him in the face, and Dark would quickly return it with the same force. Before the two of them fly off in opposite directions, Dark would create two blue spheres and send them up into the sky and the other down to the ground. The two would stop just a few meters from where they were and would look at each other from afar, but Issei would notice that Dark was smiling and he would feel two magical powers, but he would not be able to react, and the two powers that Dark had launched would collide, and Issei was the point where they would collide and there would be a great explosion. "That's what you get for facing me," Dark would say, but he would be surprised to feel how Issei was behind him, with half of his facial armor destroyed, and he looked furious. Dark would quickly turn around and block Issei's fist, but he would turn to dust, and Dark would be even more shocked as he would feel his arm being surrounded by the same whips as before and was dragged towards where the two spheres had collided. There was Issei, who was smiling at having deceived Dark since he had created that clone with part of the broken armor to make him believe that it was the real one, while the real Issei used his power as a human and diminished it completely so that he would not see it since the explosion had raised a lot of dust. Issei would once again activate his armor to 100% and attracting Dark would create a super sphere of a totally white color. Dark, upon feeling that type of magic, would know what power it was and would desperately try to escape, but Issei had cast a spell on his clone so that when it touched Dark, it would turn into dust that contained a type of magic that cancelled the magic of whoever the dust fell on for 5 minutes. Dark, being about 50 meters from Issei's position, would see his death pass before his eyes and an Issei with half of his armor completely destroyed but with a psychopathic smile that would scare anyone. "Damn, I got too confident, I hope the same thing doesn't happen to them. It was a good fight," Dark would say as he heard an incredible scream from Issei, who said, "Dark 100%." Everyone would hear that great scream from Issei, and from his hand, a great symbol would be created and from it would come out a super mega powerful totally white power that would impact Dark with great force. Everyone would feel a great tremor, but they would also feel how their strength was restored. They would also hear Dark's great cry of despair, and Issei would feel how Dark's power and magic diminished, since only he could feel the magic of these beings. So after a few seconds Issei would make that white power disappear and would see how Dark was on the ground almost dead. Issei, seeing how Dark was no longer a threat, would fall to the ground, disappearing what was left of his armor. In that moment, everyone would make the great energy field disappear and would go to see Issei, who using their powers would heal Issei, but would not regenerate his magic since they could not do it. He would open his eyes and everyone would congratulate him, but he would stand up and say a few words that would surprise everyone. "This isn't over yet," the brown-haired boy would say, and Asia Dark would start walking followed by everyone. Everyone would see how Dark was on the ground, but they would be surprised to see how he was now white and that he was still alive but about to die. "You're impressive, kid, you used that power arc, knowing that it was the only thing that would make me return to my true self. Listen kid, before I die I have to tell you something, the other 4 that remain will come very soon, so take all my power and face them. With my power and yours combined with Trixa's and Drake's you can defeat them. I have done very horrible things like killing my own creation, the one you call God, and many more. I entrust this world to you who are not to blame for being as they are. Please, save them," the white being would say, who would die after dropping his hand. Everyone who had heard that would be shocked. No, the next thing, they wouldn't know how to take everything he said, but they would see how Issei was looking at the ground with his hair covering his eyes. "Okay, I'll help you and save you all," Issei would say, where he would stretch out his hand and the body of the white being would begin to turn to dust, entering Issei's body, surprising everyone. "Very well, it's time for you to know everything," Issei would say, standing up and looking very seriously at everyone. Chapter: The Decision. "What do you mean, Issei?" Xerxes would ask, who did not understand anything of what was happening, just like the rest of the beings of the supernatural world. "I will tell you the truth about how I got this power and what is coming, so you can prepare yourself," Issei would say seriously. This is how Issei explained in detail everything that happened since he defeated Trihexa and how she absorbed him, how the girls betrayed him and his escape, his training, and the story of Drake, who gave Issei permission to tell it, so everyone would know who that dark being was that appeared out of nowhere. Everyone would be speechless upon hearing that tragic story and would not know what to say, but especially with the angels, since they would finally have known what happened to God. "Listen everyone, this must remain between warriors, because if it were to spread to people who live in peace, it would be complete chaos," Drake would say with his imposing voice. "One more thing, start training, because with your current levels you won't be able to do anything at all. I recommend that each species create a portal similar to the one God created so that they can increase their power faster. The minimum power that a normal soldier should have would be that of a Mayu currently," Issei would say, looking at everyone who would be surprised by the last thing he said. "Okay Issei, it will take a lot of effort, but we will achieve it," Azazel would say with his smile. "Well, now I say goodbye to everyone," Issei would say, turning around, and for the first time in front of someone, he would take out his incredible dragon wings that he had acquired from Trihexa. Everyone would be left with their eyes shining because those wings were more beautiful than those of the angels themselves. "Wow, Issei is incredible," you would say while your eyes shone. "Yes, we have to make Issei fall in love with us again so that he can be with us," Akeno would say. From one moment to the next, a small crater of about 5 meters would be created with Earth where Is was no longer. He was flying at such a speed that he crossed dimensions and appeared in the human world. "Well, now that I know they can return to normal with this attack I created, I can better plan my next fight," Issei would say, walking through the city. "Yes, partner, but how do you know that they will only come one by one to face you?" Drake would say seriously. "I know, because I don't think they are cowards to come and attack me more than one. They are evil but not cowards. They will come one by one, and one by one they will fall before me," Issei would say. Drake would be about to say something, but out of nowhere time would stop and Issei would see how the people and everything around him except him was completely frozen in a great tone. Issei would quickly put on his armor since he knew that someone who could stop time was not someone weak. "Who's there?" Issei would ask seriously. "Calm down kid, my name is, but you can call me Dunkel. I've come to warn you not to get too confident. The one you faced was the weakest of us. Your next opponent will be me, and it would be better if you didn't just use your fists. I hope you give me a good fight and don't let me down, brat," Dunkel would say. "Whenever you want, come, I will wait for you, and I will defeat you, and as many more as necessary. I will not let them destroy this world," Issei would say with a small smile, to which the dark being would smile evilly and disappear, returning everything to normal, to which Issei would quickly take off his armor so that no one would see him. "Well partner, it seems your next fight will be against a being that does not specialize in normal fights, but in magic. It would be better if you improve some skills if you want to win. Do not trust yourself for a second partner, it seems each one specializes in one thing," Drake would say, to which Issei would nod and continue walking. Meanwhile in hell, Issei, upon disappearing from everyone's sight, had left them all in shock, so everyone would start talking about what the future would bring, very worried. But the leaders of each species would stand in front so everyone could see them and they would talk. Listen everyone, the first thing is to stay calm. We have decided that we will all unite. We will create a room like the one Issei told us between the leaders with enough power so that each army of all species can enter and train freely. Each leader will be in charge of training their warriors to improve the magic that each species possesses. We will also create strategies so that each soldier can connect with another soldier of another species. In 24 hours we will meet at this place with the door already created, without anything else to say we say goodbye. Those would be the words of each leader, and everyone would say goodbye and return to their respective territories. The Gremories would rebuild their castle again at an extraordinary speed, who would be Xerxes and his father, meanwhile the girls, Rias and the others, would be with Rias' mother talking about Issei. "Mother, give us some advice on how we can attract Issei again," you said, very worried. "Look daughter, the first thing you have to do is know that if Issei no longer loves you, let him go, that's love. If someone doesn't love you just let him go, but only cowards do that. True people who have love for another do whatever it takes for that person to feel the same for you. You have to make an effort if you want Issei again, but with nice things, not forcing him. You have to give him space so that he thinks that what his mother would say to which they would understand very well, and they would talk and agree on one thing." Some time after the castle was rebuilt, Rias and the others would go with Xerxes to make a proposal. "Hey Oni-sama," you would say, laughing a little shyly. "If you laugh, what do you need?" Xerxes would ask. "We wanted to ask you something One-sama." "I'm listening to them," Xerxes would answer, somewhat curiously. "We want to go train with Issei." Rias is leaving her brother shocked. Chapter The Great War. "We want to train with Issei," said Rias determinedly to her brother with the other girls behind her, waiting for Xerxes' response. The Redeed was surprised by the decision Rias had made. "I'm sorry you laugh, but I can't decide that. Remember that Issei is already a superior being to us and I can't ask him, much less force him, to train you, so you yourselves will have to ask him for that favor," Xerxes would say. "So you can call him Xerxes-sama?" Akeno would ask nervously. "Of course, but I can't guarantee that he will come," Xerxes would say and create a red sphere with his hand. Meanwhile Issei was at the top of a tree in a concentrated pose. From one moment to the next, a hologram of Xerxes would appear in front of Issei, who would see Issei and wonder why he was in that position. "What's wrong Xerxes?" Issei would ask without moving a hair and only moving his lips a little, while keeping his eyes closed. "But how? His eyes are closed, his magic power is incredibly low to even detect a fly, how could he notice I was here?" Xerxes would ask himself, very surprised. "Issei, I have to ask you a favor," Xerxes would say. "What is it?" Issei would ask. "I need you to come to my castle so we can talk better," Xerxes would say. "As you wish, I'll be there in a second," he would say, to which Xerxes would nod and turn off the hologram. The Redeed would turn around to look at the girls and tell them that Issei would arrive soon, but with great surprise, he would realize that Issei was sitting in a chair a few meters away from him. "Okay, I'm here now. What did you want me for?" Issei would ask, standing up and opening his eyes. "What a surprise Issei, don't take that literally, that you'd be here in a second," Xerxes would say. "Okay Issei, the girls have something to tell you," this one would say, and Issei would look at them, and they would be embarrassed. Issei, we wanted to ask you a question," Rias would say. "We wanted to ask you if..." Akeno would say, embarrassed. "We wanted to ask you if you can train us," Asia would say determinedly, something that would surprise everyone and even Issei. "Of course, it doesn't bother me, but if you want to train with me, you'll have to endure everything and make an effort. At the end of it all you'll turn out to be the most powerful women this world has ever seen," Issei would say with a somewhat serious face, but that would make the girls very happy and would make Xerxes smile a little at the joy. "Thank you very much Issei, we promise to try hard," Zenobia would say. "One more thing," Issei would say with a darker face, "if you try to trick me into falling in love with you again, I won't train you, and I will seal all the power you gain by training with me," Issei would say, and the girls would get a little scared, but again, Issei would put on his usual smiling face. "Okay, let's go," this one would say. Issei would stretch his arm towards the girls who were together, and underneath them a white light would come out and they would disappear along with Issei. "I wish you the best and luck with Issei, I will wait for you, and the world will know who the most powerful women on the planet are," Xerxes would say with a smile. "Very well, we will train here," Issei would say, showing the girls a very large plain full of flowers. "Here? And what's so special about this place, Issei?" Rias would ask, doubting just like the others. This Issei would answer, raising his hand, and around them a giant transparent dome would be created, but with magic, so that there would be so much gravity to the point that the girls would fall to the ground without being able to move a hair, but Issei, like the plants, flowers and trees, could be as if nothing had happened without gravity affecting them in the slightest. "But what?" Zenobia would ask, paralyzed. "Well, this will be your first step in training, you will have to calm your magical power to a point where you can move around easily," Issei would say, walking towards a nearby tree and lying down. The whole month would pass like this, and all the magical beings would continue training in a completely unusual way. One day in the human world, winged creatures would appear on the ocean, which all the beings of the supernatural world would feel, so they would go to see what it was. Everyone would arrive and realize that there were some kind of monsters that walked on all fours, but they would be surprised to see how they were turned into stone and did not move. But behind all this army there were two that were different and much larger than the rest, and one seemed to be the leader and the other the second in command. Cervero leader. Minotaur. Second in command. What do we do? Xerxes would ask. We better destroy them before they become a danger, Odin would say with his army and sons Thor and Loki. But everyone would see with terror how little by little they were returning to normal, and the stone began to break. They would feel how a great hatred ran through the entire body of these monsters, who would look at the enemy army as prey. The last to return to normal would be Cerberus, who with great hatred and hunger would see the opposing army, and the three heads would give a great bark that would be heard throughout the human and supernatural world. This bark would be a signal for the chimeras to attack, who without wasting a second would launch themselves against the enemy army with a thirst for blood. Damn, we must have killed them before they returned to normal, Azazel would say with a worried and nervous smile. Odin, who was in front of the entire supernatural army with his two sons behind him, would see how the entire army of chimeras was approaching to finish them all off. Loki. Odin would say. Yes, Father Loki would answer, who with a snap would make his children appear, the great wolf Fenrir and the immense serpent Jormungandr. Fenrir would appear behind Loki where all the soldiers would get scared and move aside to give him space, and Jormungandr would come out of the ocean. Are you ready, my children? Odin would ask. Of course, Father Thor would say with his imposing voice. Attack. Odin would shout with a great cry. The entire supernatural army would launch itself against the chimeras where a great war would be created, destroying everything around them. Fenrir would stay still without attacking, since he would see the Minotaur with great hatred and as his prey, just like the Minotaur to Fenrir. The great Minotaur would notice how his army of chimeras was being destroyed by the faction leaders, so with his magic, he would create 5 beings that would take care of all the leaders. These creatures would go straight to attack the leaders, who would join in fighting these creatures. Jormungandr was about to attack, but he felt a great presence approaching him, and about 200 meters away, he would see the great Kraken. Jormungandr and the Kraken would approach at great speed and begin to attack each other. Meanwhile, Fenrir and the Minotaur would start running towards each other to start a big fight. This is how the worst war the world has ever had would begin. The only one who did not fight was the great Cerberus, who watched everything. After the great war begins. The war between beings of the world would begin. We see how the leaders of all the supernatural races would be fighting strongly against some satyrs, who each had almost triple the power of each of the leaders, so they had joined together to fight these 5 creatures. On the other hand, Fenrir and the great Minotaur would start running towards each other at great speed. Being a few meters away, Fenrir would jump, and with his big mouth, he would grab one of the Minotaur's horns, and, turning 360 degrees, he would send the Minotaur flying. On the other hand, Jormungandr, upon feeling the presence of the Kraken, would remain watching the place where this colossal creature would come out, so that it could be seen. The two immense creatures would stare at each other, and the first to attack would be Jormungandr, who at great speed would launch himself towards the Kraken, with his immense mouth trying to bite its head, but a few meters from arriving, the great Kraken would raise its tentacles and entangle the entire head of Jormungandr, stopping his progress. The great serpent would try to break free from the Kraken, but this colossal creature would squeeze its tentacles to crush Jormungandr's head, but quickly the Midgard serpent would release a powerful poison from its mouth that would fall on the face of the great Kraken, who would quickly take out all of Jormungandr's tentacles to get the poison out of his face, but the serpent, increasing its speed, would give him a powerful headbutt where the impact would make the planet tremble, causing great earthquakes. The great Kraken, upon feeling that huge blow, would be sent about 300 meters back, but Jormungandr, without leaving him any time to defend himself, would stretch about 500 meters into the sky at an immense speed, and before falling would let out an incredible scream that would call the attention of everyone who would watch the fight between these two titans. The huge snake would drop at a bestial speed on the Kraken, with its mouth open to devour it whole, watching from afar, a scene too epic. Just a few centimeters before Jormungandr crashed into the Kraken, we would see how this colossal octopus would once again entangle Jormungandr with its tentacles, but even so, the two dived to the bottom of the ocean, creating a view as if a nuclear bomb had fallen. The great server, upon seeing this, would make an expression of annoyance with one of his 3 heads, and then continue looking at the war that was taking place in front of him. Thousands and thousands of corpses were lying on the ground. Humanity would be feeling great fear, thinking it was the end of the world. Great chaos would break out on Earth, volcanoes would become active, very strange climate changes would begin to happen, entire cities would be flooded under ocean water, the Earth would split. All this would happen on Earth because of the fight between beings of other races. Meanwhile Issei and the girls continued training without realizing anything since at the beginning of the training, Issei had put up an immense barrier where no one could detect their powers, nor could they detect the magical power of others outside the barrier. Back on the fighting field. Fenrir had sent the Minotaur flying towards a mountain hundreds of kilometers from where the war was taking place. Seconds later Fenrir would see where the Minotaur had fallen and destroyed the mountain, and giving a great release he would go towards it. But what he didn't know was that a few meters from landing, he would see how the Minotaur would get up as if nothing had happened and would jump towards Fenrir at a speed he couldn't see. The Minotaur would grab Fenrir by the neck and slam him against the ground. "Damn beast, you'll pay for having touched me," the two-legged creature would say. Then the Minotaur would try to give an incredible blow to Fenrir's face, but the great giant wolf would bite his arm and tear it off. The Minotaur, feeling the great pain, screamed and retreated. Fenrir quickly threw himself at him and tore off another leg. The creature would fall to the ground in great pain watching as the immense wolf approached him. "Damn creature, what are you doing?" he would ask, but he wouldn't receive any answer, and a few seconds later he would smile. "Don't think you've beaten me, stupid dog," he would say, smiling. The Minotaur would create a green sphere from his hand and throw it in Fenrir's face, who was only a few meters away. The son of Loki, seeing that, would quickly create a fireball from his mouth and the two attacks would explode, but the Minotaur would cover himself with a barrier and Fenrir would fly away. After about 30 seconds the Minotaur would stand up on his one leg and see Fenrir, who had fallen off the mountain and was lying there. "Ha! Stupid beast, unlike you, I don't mind having parts of my body removed since I can regenerate," the Minotaur would say, who would begin to reconstruct his arm and leg. He would see the place where Fenrir was again, but it would have disappeared, the creature, although he didn't know why, but he would start to feel an immense fear, and out of nowhere he would feel a great presence behind him. This one would turn around and see him laugh, but with a very different appearance. The Minotaur would feel great terror upon seeing that giant creature that looked more like a demon. What is this? I've never felt such power," the Minotaur would say, paralyzed. "Not even I, with my maximum power, would approach this creature," the Minotaur would say to himself mentally. Then Fenrir would open to eat it. "What? No, wait, I give up, don't eat me, I don't want to die." The Minotaur would scream desperately with great terror and then completely eat the Minotaur. After a few seconds he would see his next rival, who was on the fighting field, who was already staring at Fenrir with bloodlust, and Fenrir would look at him as well. These two immense creatures would stare at each other and Fenrir would take a great leap towards where the war was taking place. All the beings that were fighting upon seeing this would quickly move away and Fenrir would land about 50 meters from Cervero. "It can't be, he is out of control, he unleashed all his power," Loki would say, very surprised and motionless like all the other beings who would stop the war to see that. "Damn, in that way not even I could stop him," Odin would say. "Not even with Thor's help could we stop him," he would say mentally. While all the other beings who had stopped fighting were motionless upon feeling the terrifying power that Fenrir had. The big furious wolf would be staring at Cervero with bloodshot eyes, then he would give a great bark that would send everyone around him flying and would be heard throughout the world. That bark was so powerful that it made Cervero move a few meters back, but the most surprising thing is that he was able to destroy the barrier that Issei had put up and made him and the other girls who were training realize all the presences that were many kilometers away from where they were. Fenrir, without waiting a second longer, would launch himself at Cervero, who, being a few centimeters away from the three-headed dog, would feel a great pain in his face that would be slammed against the ground. That happened because Cervero, before Fenrir could touch him, had turned around at a speed that not even Fenrir could see and gave a huge and powerful blow with his tail to Fenrir's face, who was slammed against the ground, creating an immense crater. Everyone present would be truly shocked and terrified, since if Fenrir fell that easily with his current power, that meant that Cervero was very far from the power of this great wolf. Fenrir would quickly get up trying to bite one of the heads on the side, but the other two heads would open their mouths and spit out an immense amount of fire that was worse than that of hell. Xerxes himself, who was many meters away, would feel a lot of heat with that fire, realizing that the fire of hell was nothing compared to the one that Cervero expelled. Fenrir had been completely burned but still stood with his transformation, surprising everyone. The deer, already getting a little tired of this wolf, would give him another powerful blow with his tail that would send him flying many meters, destroying the entire floor. "No curse," Loki would say, trying to go, but Odin would stop him. "Wait, son, if you go you will die, we have to have hope that Issei will arrive before Fenrir dies," Odin would say, but deep down he knew that Fenrir would very possibly die. Everyone would be surprised to see that Loki's son stood up again, but with a lot of blood in his body. Fenrir would begin to open his mouth and would begin to create an immense ball of power that concentrated all his vital energy of purple color with rays around it. "No. That's it," Loki would say very nervously. Everyone would feel a power never seen before coming from Fenrir's mouth. Cervero would feel that power and prepare to receive it with all his power. Chapter: The Arrival of the Fenrir was preparing his most powerful attack that took with it all his vital energy, but it was a sacrifice he had to make to finish off Severo. Meanwhile, Severo, seeing this, would prepare to receive it with all his strength. All the soldiers and leaders who were still alive would move far away from that place and would see everything. The world would slowly begin to be destroyed by that great amount of power. While Severo watched very seriously the great attack that the great wolf Fenrir was preparing. From one moment to another Fenrir would launch his immense attack that would surprise everyone, and that could be seen all over the planet coming out of it. Everyone would be shocked by the immense power and size of the most powerful attack they had ever seen in their lives. After a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, the dust that had been raised would spread and Fenrir would be seen still standing, but without moving a hair. He is dead, Xerxes would say, very surprised. Incredible, that's surprising, you defeated him would be some of the soldiers' comments. Despite everything. He died standing up, he never gave up, Michael would say. I'm sorry son, Fenrir is dead, but at least he saved us from that horrible three-headed beast, Odin would say seriously looking at Loki who was motionless. But from one moment to the next, everyone would notice a very powerful presence, everyone would look very scared at the position where the deer was and he was still alive. But what? That bastard is still alive. How is it possible that someone survives such catastrophic power? Would be many of the comments of the terrified soldiers. Severo, who had received the full force of the attack, was still seen standing, but with a lot of blood coming out of his body and one of his heads missing, but he also looked very furious. The now two-headed dog, very angry, would give a scream of fury so loud that it would make absolutely all beings, no matter if they are allies or enemies, have to cover their ears because they could die from that loud howl. A few minutes before. The great Jormungandr and the mighty Kraken had submerged under the ocean to continue their great battle where they could unleash their maximum powers since it was the best territory for both of them. The immense Kraken with all its tentacles would create magic circles in all of them and immense spheres of power would come out that would try to explode in the body of the Jormungandr, but he would quickly create a magic shield around his entire long body, protecting himself from the great attack. Then the huge serpent would create a portal in front of its mouth and another would appear on the back of the Kraken. Jormungandr would quickly open his huge mouth and an immense tornado would come out that would appear behind the Kraken, but this one using his great speed would dodge it, but the tornado would not disappear but would go up and thus in the world, more tornadoes would begin to be created, creating the very same cause. Thus the two titans would continue their incredible fight for a few minutes until the moment when Fenrir had launched the attack on Severo and this one, very wounded, had resisted it and, very angry, had let out a great howl. Present. The great Severo would look at all the soldiers of the factions and the supernatural world with bloodlust, but from one moment to another, they would hear an explosion and see something giant shooting out of the water. Everyone, including Severo, would see this and many kilometers from where they were, they would see how the Kraken fell to the ground without its tentacles and with a lot of purple blood all over its face, just seconds away from dying. Jormungandr has done it, he defeated the Kraken, Odin would say seeing the corpse of the Kraken, but in that they would see how Jormungandr came out of the water looking in the direction of the Kraken and upon seeing that he had died, he would simply let himself fall into the water equally dead with many serious injuries. It can't be, Jormungandr has also fallen, Thor would say. They are incredible, Jormungandr was already dead, but he only came out of the water to verify if the Kraken was alive, and when he saw that he had already finished his duty, he decided to finally rest in peace, Azazel would say, very nervous, but with a small smile. Yes, but now we have the most powerful beast left, Xerxes would say, looking at the Severo who was looking away from the Kraken, still very angry. Everyone on guard, we have to kill time until Issei or someone else appears, Odin would say seriously, preparing his maximum forces as well as all the soldiers. Severo would stay for a few seconds watching who would be his next victim and would see Loki since his son Jormungandr finished off the Kraken and Fenrir hurt him a lot, so he would seek revenge. From one moment to the next, the Severo would jump just meters from having jumped, his body would begin to disappear, surprising everyone since it was as if he had disappeared out of nowhere without any portal, but they would be terrified to see how little by little his body reappeared behind Loki with his mouth open to eat him. Loki, seeing that, would feel like all time stopped and those few seconds that passed would be like minutes, but something would happen that would leave everyone speechless. Severo would be hit by a huge explosion in his ribs, pushing him to the ground, preventing him from eating Loki, but Severo would fall on his feet almost without any damage. The person responsible for this would be none other than Issei, who along with the girls had arrived at the battlefield. Sorry for being late, but we were very busy, Issei would say very seriously looking at Severo while he was flying, and the two-headed dog looked at him with more fury than before. From one moment to the next and without anyone, not even Cervero or the girls seeing him, Issei would disappear and appear on top of one of Cervero's heads, giving him an incredible punch to the head so powerful and potent that Cervero's head and entire body would fall to the ground, creating a large crater, and just as he disappeared, Issei would appear again in the same place where he was, while Cervero stood up with immense pain in his head. Without a doubt Issei is the most powerful among us, searches would say mentally, motionless, seeing how from one moment to the next the chestnut had disappeared and with a single blow, he knocked down the Cervero. That kid is very strong, at least he's on our side, Auden would say mentally. At least Issei of this world didn't turn bad when he was betrayed and understood that it was all a misunderstanding and forgave the girls and is on our side, Azazel would say, smiling nervously. You bastard, I will never forgive you for this, the deer would say, shocking everyone since he didn't know he could speak, but Issei would smile and speak calmly. Do what you want but I won't fight, girls, I'll leave this as a test for your training, Issei would say, looking at Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, Gasper, Zenobia, Kiba and Arena. You Asia will stay with me and put your magic to the test, Issei would say, surprising everyone. Wait, Issei, do you know what you're doing? Xerxes would ask worriedly. Of course I know, Xerxes, you don't have to worry, Issei would answer with a confident smile. It's okay, Issei, we won't let you down, you would say as you and your friends flew near the Cervero. Very well, we will do this without disappointing, Issei, you would answer. You would laugh, seeing everyone who would nod. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.